Did you know that Diablo 1 was originally supposed to be a turn-based game and that Diablo 2 was supposed to get a second expansion focused on online PvP? In this video, I'm going to talk about Blizzard's design decisions that led to the games that we love today, as well as many cancelled projects that could have been quite interesting to explore. Speaking of Diablo knowledge, stay tuned until the end of the video to figure out how you can win a free Diablo book. Let's jump right in. First off, let's talk about Diablo 1. So when Diablo 1 was first being developed by Blizzard North, it was in fact in production as a turn-based game. And it wasn't until Blizzard South released Warcraft 1, really one of the first ever real-time strategy games, that Blizzard North started heading into the real-time direction. See, Blizzard South has asked Blizzard North to think about making Diablo into a real-time RPG, as it worked out really well in Warcraft 1. One of the co-founders of Diablo 1, David Brevik, mentioned in an interview that he really did not want to go into the real-time direction. One thing that he loved about turn-based RPGs is that there's a certain amount of depth and strategy involved when you have to pause and think about your next move to emerge victorious. However, upon voting with his development team of about 15, 11 of them all voted in favor of making the game a real-time hack and slash. What happened next was that David, in one Friday evening, yes, just one evening, modified the code to make it a real-time hack and slash, and upon having the warrior smack and kill a skeleton with a club, he said it felt so good that he knew this was the direction that Diablo needed to head in. And frankly, it was a pivotal moment in creating the whole ARPG genre. The entire direction of the genre would have changed significantly if Diablo 1 never went in that direction. Speaking of Diablo 1, there was a lot of content in the game that never made it through launch but was still in the game files. For example, you had Adria and Itherael, who both appeared in Diablo II, originally part of the first game. And there was also a priest named Tremaine who gave you a quest to kill Itherael's equivalent in hell named Fleshdoom, who had Azra's cursed sister blade called Shadowfang. Next, believe it or not, after the launch of Diablo 2, Blizzard North was working on a Game Boy game called Diablo Jr., and it was meant to be a prequel to Diablo 1. See, at the time, Pokemon was huge, hitting the Game Boy, and I believe the Game Boy Color was out at the time, and create a Game Boy Diablo. One thought of it was that it would be a turn-based like Pokemon, except you'd have the player character who, at the time, there was a knight character and a mage character fight against monsters in the field. Now, upon Blizzard North's leadership resigning, Blizzard South went up and took a look at this game and chose to cancel it due to production costs. Further expanding on this reasoning, it was due to Blizzard's focus on Battle.net and online games at the time and not wanting to work through Nintendo to release this game. Also, Blizzard was very focused on PC games at this time. And speaking of Diablo 2, did you know that there was actually supposed to be a second expansion after Lord of Destruction solely focused on online features? This included PvP clans, being able to build your own clan halls, as well as other features. However, Blizzard at the time wanted the developers to move straight into Diablo 3, which they did. If you ever wondered why there was such a huge gap between Diablo Lord of Destruction in 2001 and Diablo 3 in 2012, it's because the original version of Diablo 3 actually got its start all the way back in 2001 after the release of Lord of Destruction. The original version of Diablo 3 was actually meant to take place fully in heaven, and the player was meant to help defend heaven against the legions of hell. There was a two-faction system here too, in where the character could make decisions to side with either heaven or hell, and every item that dropped had an order or chaos equivalent to it, depending on the player's affinity. Diablo 3 was developed as an MMO light, as Blizzard saw Diablo 3 almost like a backup to World of Warcraft. Now, after 2 years, in 2003, Blizzard North's key leadership had left the company, and Blizzard South started to get more involved in this version of Diablo 3. Specifically, Chris Metzen, who's well known now for World of Warcraft, offered different directions for for the game, which sent Blizzard North staff scrambling. Internally, the development team was split on whether they want to stick closely to the framework of Diablo II, essentially making this version of Diablo III more like Diablo 2.5, and then the other half was wanting to try out new ideas. Now, despite numerous content being added to the game, at this point there were 3 different zones, like a Heaven Landing zone, a zone called the Keep, and then Heaven itself, where you could see different depictions of angels than they are seen currently in Diablo 3 or the original Diablo 2. Now, in 2005, Blizzard South took a look at the progress of Diablo 3, and frankly, regardless of how much content was being added to it, the game was just not coming together and had no true identity. So at this time, Blizzard decided to cancel this version of Diablo 3 and close Blizzard North's doors forever. 1 year later, in 2006, Blizzard South took over the development of Diablo 3 and frankly chose to scrap all of the content developed for Blizzard North's game, with Jay Wilson, who was hired to develop Diablo 3, stated that it lacked the high-level feel of identity that Blizzard is known for, with the game looking and feeling more like a Diablo 2.5 than something new. Now, I know a lot of people believe Diablo 2 was the best version of Diablo, so maybe a Diablo 2.5 wasn't really the worst thing to happen. And of course, as a result of this, 6 years later, the reboot, which is the Diablo 3 we have now, was then produced. Now, when it comes to Diablo 3, there were actually 2 expansions originally planned. While Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls was in production, the next expansion, which was codenamed King of the North, was already being drafted out and in early development. It was originally expected to be revealed 1 year after Reaper of Souls' release in 2015. However, prior to Reaper of Souls' release in 2014, Team 3 was informed that Diablo 3 was not going to get a second expansion, regardless of how good Reaper of Souls was. Team 3 was really puzzled at the time because the executives were very complimentary towards Reaper of Souls. The truth is that then CEO of Blizzard, Mike Morhaime, and other C officers felt like, aside from this, the ugly reality of finances came into the mix. Diablo 3, with the closure of the Real Money auction house, lacked a steady revenue stream outside of Asia, which had a free-to-play model, when all its other games at the time had either a subscription fee like World of Warcraft or microtransactions such as Hearthstone Booster Pack and Heroes of the Storm. This made it difficult for Blizzard to justify supporting the 100 people that were working on this expansion. Now, Morhaime did applaud Reaper of Souls' success and reception, but he stuck to wanting to leave Diablo 3 on a high note. Now, since development work was already done on Diablo 3 King of the North, the zones were added as free additions to Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls, such as the Ruins of Sescheron, Kanai's Cube, and Grey Hollow Island, which Morhaime insisted on doing, stating that he wanted to win back the hearts and minds of people who were disappointed with the game's original release. Moving on to Diablo IV, did you know that the original iteration was more of a Dark Souls-esque game with third-person camera view and combat? Well, here's a story of why there was a 9-year gap between Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. Following the cancellation of Diablo 3's second expansion, Josh Mosquera, who took over Diablo 3 from Jay Wilson and directed Reaper of Souls, including important choices at the time like choosing Malthael as the antagonist, was asked by Mike Morhaime to work immediately on Diablo 4, and he wanted it to be released as soon as possible. So in 2014, work on this version of Diablo 4 began development. Working on Diablo 3 for so long, Mosquera wanted to do something new for Diablo 4, and it began development as a game with a third-person perspective, similar to Dark Souls. The combat itself was being emulated after the Batman Arkham series, but issues started to arise. First off, the Batman Arkham games were single-player games, and certain combat features, like say time dilation, proved problematic to pull off in multiplayer. The game started to veer off so far from previous Diablo games that Blizzard began questioning if it was even going to be called Diablo 4. At this point, Mosquera was very slow in making decisions about the game's direction, leading to many of Team 3's development team being idle. And in 2016, he started barely coming into the office, only to leave the company shortly after. Upon his departure, Blizzard sent executives and lead designers to take a look at this version of Diablo IV, and frankly, they were unimpressed. Deeming the project doomed without Mascara, Hades was cancelled, with Team 3 being split to work on 2 separate projects. One being Diablo IV as we know it today, and then the other being a small group that created the Diablo III's Rise of the Necromancer expansion that at the time was really cool, but I know I myself was a bit surprised we were randomly getting this additional content for Diablo III. So there you have it, folks. I just emptied the skeletons in the Diablo series closet. If you know any other tidbits or you want to know more on any of these canceled titles, be sure to say so in the comments below. And speaking of comments, if you want a chance to win this Horadric Vault, which has 4 different Diablo lore books, along with 3 other prizes this month, be sure to comment down Tyrael in the comments below for 1 entry. If you want to gain additional entries, be sure to follow and chat on my stream, either on YouTube or Twitch, to gain an additional entry. And if you want to gain even more, be sure to join me on Twitch specifically and use channel points to increase your chances of winning. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoy Diablo content, be sure to like, subscribe, and come back next week for the next video. Thank you for watching. Until next time.